Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today's video we are talking about the brand new DLC for Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. Took me a minute, but I finally finished it, and man, it was so good. It's probably one of the better games that I've played this year, like no joke. And with so many great games that have come out this year, that's really saying much. We're going to talk, of course, about the Phantom Liberty DLC as well as the 2.0 update, which is where a vast majority of these really big changes to Cyberpunk happen. But before we get into the video, I am Falso21. I love playing games and I love making videos. So if you guys enjoy the content, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the page. So to start off, I have not played Cyberpunk since its release, and honestly, even when I played it back then, I overall enjoyed the game. I think I gave it like a 6 or a 7, mainly due to its plethora of technical issues, but like I said, I've always thought that the story was really good, and here in Phantom Liberty, that is no different. The story here is awesome. I loved it from start to finish, and honestly, if this game was released now in the state that it's in right now, there'd be no question that it would be on pretty much everybody's Game of the Year list. So some of the things I'm going to mention is in the 2.0 update, but it does also apply to the Phantom Liberty DLC. And right off the bat, I don't know all of the changes that the 2.0 update brought. I mean, I'm sure there's a list somewhere online. These are just the things that I noticed right away since I haven't played the game since it first came out a few years ago. First things first is that the graphics looked way more improved than they did in the base game. And overall, it actually looked like a next-gen game. I played specifically on the PlayStation 5, and I was just impressed about how everything just looked so much better. The city looked so much cooler. The graphic fidelity just looked so much better. Night City looked how I thought it was supposed to look. Overall, just everything looked so much better. Next thing that I noticed just right away is that Night City itself just felt so much more alive. The city felt more lived in. There's people running around, and you go into, shopping centers or shopping areas, and there's just tons of people walking in and out, and it just feels more lived in. There's cars on the road now. Before, I remember driving down the highways and there'd just be no cars on the road. Now there's tons of cars, there's tons of vehicles, and like I said, just Night City as a whole just feels so much more like an actual city, feels much more alive, a lived-in city. Everything just looks better. Next up that I noticed right away is that the driving for the vehicles was way improved. I remember just not really liking how the driving felt in the base game, and especially how it was on release. I personally just ended up using the fast travel more than anything to get around. Now they actually just revamped the vehicles. They actually feel fun to drive. So basically this whole DLC I've been using cars to get around from point A to point B. It's just like the overall just driving experience is much better than it used to be in the base game. And on top of that, I feel like that they made the vehicles cheaper to get. I just remember in the base game, like, they were just so expensive. I think I had maybe like 1 or 2 that I actually went out of my way to buy. It's just they were just so much more expensive, and I had to save up a ton of eddies, and now there's a lot of discounts and whatnot. It just felt like now it's a lot cheaper to buy a lot of these vehicles. And on top of that, they added vehicle combat as well. So now you can shoot your weapons out the window, and better yet, they even have some cars that have built-in guns, which was really fun to mess with. One of my favorite features that they fixed was the police system. Man, it is so much better than it was in the base game. It's so much more fun now. The police system isn't totally broken, and it's so similar to like what you would see in a Grand Theft Auto game, how it's got like the star ranking, but man, was it so much fun. Like, and after you get a couple stars, the police actually will start ramming your vehicle and trying to set up blockades on the highways and stuff to try and stop you. And when you get to 5 stars on the police rating or whatever, they label you as a cyber psycho, and then they bring in Max Tech. They bring in the freaking military to try and stop you because you're just causing such havoc. It's so much fun. Police system is really great. On a plus side, Max Tech is no joke to mess with. There's a few times that I was trying to get away from them, and they landed like right on my vehicle, and they flipped my vehicle so that I couldn't run away anymore, and it made me have to eject my vehicle. They were so fast, and their health balls are so huge that they pretty much just insta-killed me anyway. Overall, I really enjoyed all the changes to the police system. It's actually super fun now, and I can't tell you how many times I was just causing havoc in Night City just to try to get that 5-star rating. Next big change was the skill tree. They made it a little simpler. I felt like before there was just a ton, and it was a little bit overbearing and a bit confusing, if I'm being honest. I really like how now it's just much easier to navigate. A lot of the things are tied to your level, so some skills are locked right away until you level up that specific skill tree. And for me personally, I just thought it was a little easier to make builds. There's like a ton of skills before, and it just felt like a lot, and they kind of condensed things down, got rid of some skills, added some. I just feel like the overall experience is just much easier to navigate and to decide what you want to put points into. You could also refund a few skill points in specific skill trees, so you can mess around with a few different builds. I know when the game came out, I focused a ton on melee weapons, and I tried to make my build more melee focused. This time around with the Phantom Liberty DLC, I wanted to focus more on like the skill and tech, all like the cyberware stuff, being a quick hack fiend, and so all of that was just really fun. They've also overhauled the entire cybernetics, like your cyberware system, and just like the skill tree, a lot of it is just made simpler, much easier to use. Before, there was just so many different parts and components to it. At least for me, it was a bit overbearing. Yeah, I eventually figured it out and it wasn't too bad, but just jumping in, there's just a lot. They made it much easier, much simpler to use. Cyberware is also linked to your level, so the higher level you are, the more cyberware you're able to equip. And as I started climbing up in those levels, I had cyberware literally equipped in all of the slots. I had the Mantis arms, I had operating system that had like, I think 8 different quick hacks that I could do, which was fun. I loved doing all the quick hacks. I never really messed with that in the base game, so this was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed all the cybernetics. My whole character was just totally chromed out. Talking a little bit about like the clothing, which kind of goes in with cyberware, the defense and your overall like armor in the game is now tied to your cybernetics. So the more cybernetics that you have equipped, the higher your armor goes, and there's specific cyberware that you can equip that does have higher armor than others, which before it was all tied to your clothing, which I personally really didn't like, because normally you want to equip all the cool stuff, but now I'm equipping just kind of whatever just so I can have that higher armor stat. They totally got rid of it. Clothing is just for fashion now, just to look cool, so that was a quality of life improvement. So I'm sure there's like a ton more changes, specifically with the 2.0 update. Like I said, I don't know all of them. I'm sure there's a list out there, but these are just a couple of big changes that I noticed right away jumping into the Phantom Liberty DLC. Speaking of which, the DLC takes place in a new part of Night City called Dogtown, which is totally walled off, and if I remember correctly, it's like off of Pacifica or like a part of Pacifica. Regardless, it's totally like walled off, and without going into too many spoilers on the story, you get contacted by a new character, a netrunner named Songbird. She knows that you're dying and offers to help in exchange for your services in rescuing the president. You soon realize that this mission is a lot bigger than you realized. Soon we are introduced to Idris Elba's character, Solomon Reed, who you go to for help. I will say that all of the new characters, Solomon Reed, Songbird, just to name a few, there's a couple other ones, the president, all were really well done. I loved their stories. I thought the story was really well done. All the voice acting was really good. And I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but just the graphics overall, the motion capture, just everything, they just upped their game on literally everything with this DLC. Everything looked awesome. And I just really don't want to spoil the story. The story I personally thought was really good. The base story of Cyberpunk 2077 is also really good. They have several different endings, and here in the DLC, they just like that, they have multiple different endings. I just don't want to spoil it. Long story short, if you guys haven't played this DLC, definitely go out and get it. It is so much fun. As I mentioned, the game does have multiple different endings that are dependent on your choices that you make throughout the game. And if I'm being honest, choice isn't as much of a big thing in this DLC as in, I think, in the base game or even other games. Specifically, there's only like 2 missions where whatever choice you make changes the outcome of the ending. So there's one, without going into spoilers, there's this one mission where you have to side with which person you're going to side with. Are you going to help this person, or are you going to not help this person? And depending on what you do, opens up 2 different endings, and from there there's another mission further down the road that presents you another 2 choices. And so kind of like that, there's only really 2 different missions that really the choices that you make matter. There's a few other things where you can choose your choices, but they don't really change the outcome of the ending or the story per se. So I just wish that there's a little bit more choices involved. It's really just those 2 missions, more or less. I also just really liked the part of Dogtown, part of Night City, Dogtown. It's overrun by an ex-military guy, and running around and fighting all of his men and his goons was really fun, mainly because the combat itself was just a blast to play. All the main missions were really enjoyable. There's a ton more gigs, there's a ton more side quests to do. They just added a lot into this DLC. You could spend a ton of time just doing stuff from the DLC. All the guns feel really great, just like the main game. I personally thought all the weapons felt really great as well in the base game. Here, they don't add like a ton new crazy weapons, but all the weapons felt really great. All of the just combat, the melee combat, the net running, the cyberware, all of that put together, the combat was just a lot of fun, and honestly was just super addicting. There's so many times where I'm just running around just purely just fighting his goons or random enemies out in Dogtown or in the open world, and it's just mainly because the combat was fun. Anytime I can engage in combat, I was trying to do so. It was honestly a blast hacking into enemies, blinding them, taking over turrets, and then just blasting them with everything in my arsenal. Not necessarily DLC related, but they added the Witcher sword to the game, which was super cool. I'm a huge Witcher fan, so now you can have Geralt's sword from The Witcher 3. I believe it's called Gwendolyn. I've drawn a blank off on it, honestly, but super fun. I love that they added that to the game. As far as performance goes, I personally didn't have any crashes or bugs, which was huge considering how the game was when it was first released. I just had tons of crashes, tons of bugs when it first came out. As I mentioned earlier, I am playing on the PlayStation 5, and overall, I had a great experience, and if I'm being honest, this has to be one of my favorite games that I've played this year. And it was just DLC, which blows my mind. Like, I know the base game came out with its issues, and that no one's excusing that, but just like The Witcher 3, their DLCs were absolutely incredible, and Cyberpunk is no exception. Phantom Liberty is absolutely incredible. It's also a fairly large DLC as well. I think it took me about 30-ish hours to beat the game, and that's with me doing, of course, all the main missions, doing a good majority of the side missions, a lot of new gigs, and then just messing around in the open world, fighting the police, trying to get that 5-star rating, fighting random enemies in the open world. So all that together took me about 30-ish hours. I'm sure you could get it in shorter amount of time if you just focused on like the main missions, but I wanted to fully experience everything that Phantom Liberty had to offer, and it absolutely delivers. This DLC was incredible, and honestly, if they could have just slapped a Cyberpunk 2 on this and resold it as Cyberpunk 2, and I would have bought it, and it would have been so much better than the first game. But this is DLC. I'm hoping that they make a second game, because if it's anything like they did with this DLC, it's going to be fire. All those things put together, I'm going to give Cyberpunk 2077 a Phantom Liberty a 9 out of 10. And honestly, I mentioned this earlier, it is one of the best games that I've played this year, and it's only DLC. And this year has been jammed packed full of just incredible games. And this is definitely, I would have to really think about it, but it's definitely in like my top 3 or 5 games that I've played this year. This DLC was awesome. If you guys haven't yet, go out there, go buy it, go play it. If you guys have it, the Cyberpunk 2077, I would say get it so that you can play this DLC. And honestly, this DLC was so much fun that I am considering going back and just doing a brand new playthrough. I just played the DLC part. They have an option to just jump straight into the DLC. So I do want to start a brand new game, because that's how fun this was. And the changes that they made with the 2.0 update are awesome. They totally fixed the game. The game is, like I said, I haven't played it since it was first released, and it's almost night and day. I was like looking at some of my old footage from when I played it at launch, and man, it is totally like almost night and day. It's absolutely incredible. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. If you made it this far, you guys are freaking awesome. I appreciate all the support you guys show me. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give us a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.